All right. Aloha, everyone. My name's Katie Hinson, and I'm going to be presenting today with my colleague, Melanie Lander. Both of us work at the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College program based in Manoa on Oahu. And we're going to be sharing a bit with you about a project on the story of water in Mō'ili'ili. So today, first, we're going to go through a little bit of context on the themes and intentions of this project, as well as some more detail on the neighborhood that is the focus of this effort. We'll get into the project goals and activities, and then we'll close with some very early lessons learned since we're still in the middle of our project timeline. So first, a bit of context on the motivations behind this effort and a little bit more background on the neighborhood of Mō'ili'ili, where we'll be doing most of our work. As climate change really brings increased risk of flooding to communities across the Hawaiian Islands, federal and state agencies are increasingly recognizing the need for more innovative place-based risk communication strategies. And historically, as risk communicators, we've really too often been quite disconnected from place. We fail to fully and equitably serve community members across all levels of privilege, and as a result, we've really sometimes perpetuated existing disparities and power imbalances in the neighborhoods where we work. We rely heavily on a deficit framing that focuses on the vulnerabilities of a place and a population, while oftentimes overlooking and undervaluing the community strengths and assets. So this project is part of a larger effort led by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Water Initiative to address some of these issues and try to improve risk communication practices. So what that actually looks like is we're going to try to develop a place-based process for engaging community members in discussions around sea level rise, flood hazards, and resilience. And we hope to do this through a series of installations, for lack of a better term, really a mixture of art, signage, and educational events around a particular neighborhood that tell the story of the role that water plays in that place over time. So there'll be elements of discussing historical flooding occurrences, as well as adaptation options for present and future conditions. And then we also really want to partner with and elevate local community centers and organizations as the cornerstones of community resilience in this place. Part of this effort is trying to ensure COVID-19 safe engagement throughout the project and really highlighting kind of outdoor events and opportunities. And the neighborhood that we're going to be doing this work in is the neighborhood of Mō'ili'ili in Honolulu on Oahu. Mō'ili'ili is a really good fit for this effort because it has a rich history of cultural, economic, and social connectivity to water. It's also a place that has been chronically underinvested in and underserved when it comes to resilience and hazard mitigation efforts. The original name of the place is Mō'ili'ili, and you can kind of see a little bit of explanation of the name here. So Mo is short for Mo'o, which means lizard or reptile. It can also be translated as dragon, serpent, or water spirit. And ili'ili is pebble or small stone. Mo'o play a really important part in Native Hawaiian placemaking and conceptions of water stewardship. Moho are often female shapeshifters that are capable of appearing in human forms or as lizards of different sizes, and they are frequently the protectors of sources of fresh water. So the story of Mō'ili'ili is that Hi'iaka, the younger sister of Pele, who you may have heard of, battled and defeated a mo'o, and the mo'o's body makes up a small hill in the area. So the name itself of this place is really illustrative of the deep connectivity of water to people and to community in Mō'ili'ili. And I'm going to pass it over to Melanie now.
Hi. So one of the most interesting things about this community is that a long time ago, in the Pliocene, sea levels were about 20 feet higher than they are now. And so Mō'ili'ili is actually located on an ancient coral reef that formed during those high sea levels. And before the area was urbanized, it was a really incredibly vast system of ponds and springs and streams that ran through the area. Now the eastern portion of the neighborhood is constructed on what you see in the image in the center there, a water-filled cavern that actually extends from roughly from north to south, and underlies a lot of the neighborhood and a really highly urbanized area that most of the community members don't even realize is underneath their feet. So part of our project is bringing some of this context to the forefront. Next slide, please, Katie. Another really interesting aspect of water in the community is that up until the turn of the 20th century, this area was a tremendously large natural wetland, thousands of acres. And this wealth of fresh water allowed it to be a really productive area for flooded field agriculture. And this agrarian character brought a lot of immigrant communities to the area that have had a profound impact on its evolution, and in particular has a really strong Japanese cultural heritage to this day. The neighborhood is actually over 50% Asian today, which is almost 20% higher than the statewide average. Next slide, please. So just to give you a peek into what it looks like today, as opposed to our last slide of flooded field agriculture, you can see that there's been a very strong shift toward an urban character in this area. It's very distinct in its population density. It is actually the densest area on the island of Oahu. And in second place is an area you're probably familiar with, Waikiki, which is just to its south. And you can see in the top right image some of those high rises down there. That's the Waikiki area. So this is right next to Waikiki and separated by a big canal, which is called the Aloi Canal. The area of Mō'ili'ili is mostly impervious surfaces. There's not a lot of tree canopy, and it's a real mix of low and mid-rise buildings with some single-family homes mixed in, and it has a business district on its northern side. One of the most distinct elements in the neighborhood's character today is this big canal, the Aloi Canal, and the large stream that you can see feeding it on the right-hand side of that image is actually two streams that have been diverted and channelized into one. And this hydromodification has had a really tremendous influence on the neighborhood's flood-prone nature, because what used to be a giant floodplain has now been restricted to just essentially a canal, and sometimes it overtops, and the neighborhood is very flood prone and often experiences a lot of ponding in the streets. It's also very flat, so there's not a lot of room for the water to move around and to travel into other areas that aren't as developed. Next slide, please, Katie. So as you can imagine, this history of being flood prone and experiencing floods, as well as being a wetland and having a limestone geology, which is very porous, means that this is a very sea level rise prone neighborhood. And as you can see in this screenshot of our Hawaii sea level rise viewer, the neighborhood is not on the water, but because of the giant canal that runs alongside it, it is very prone to sea level rise in the future. And it's one of the most vulnerable neighborhoods on Oahu to groundwater inundation because of its limestone geology. So this neighborhood is anticipated to have substantial challenges in the future with adaptation. And as you saw in earlier slides, it is very highly urbanized. And because it's one of the most densely populated areas on Oahu, it really deserves some attention in this area. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, now that you know more about the neighborhood and the context of why we selected it, we're really looking to find opportunities to connect with organizations that are already cornerstones of community resilience in this area and highlight how educating community members and allowing them to become more familiar with their own place and context and history can be an important part of social resiliency as conditions continue to evolve in the future. Next slide, please. So we've proposed that the organizations that we're partnering with, which are indicated on this slide as green dots, highlight a different aspect of the community's story of water, what we're calling the story of water. And so each of these local organizations will host a different aspect of this, and it can either be experienced as a trail or tour for different schools or educational organizations that might be interested in seeing it comprehensively, or it can just be noticed individually by passersby or people interacting and going about their daily lives in the community. Next slide, please. So one example of an organization that we're working with is interested in highlighting the agricultural past of the community. And the way that they're interested in doing this is by actually putting a mural on their building. So they're interested in art and kind of a creative outlet to express this information, which is a very exciting installation that will be part of the community past the project end date. Next slide, please. A different way to express this information with another organization we're working with is actually going to be through educational programming. So this particular organization works both with retirees as well as young children. And they think that the retirees have interesting stories to share about interacting with this cave system and the geology and the springs that used to exist in the neighborhood. And they might be able to provide some really interesting storytelling. And then the kids that are growing up today don't know a lot of this information. So making sure that they understand the history of the community and how it's going to impact the future of the community is really important. One more slide, please, Katie. One last example from me is an example of adaptation strategies. So we have proposed that several rain barrel installations be installed in a couple areas of the community that have some gardens. And we want to demonstrate how rainwater catchment and reuse can be used in a highly urbanized setting, particularly if it was able to be distributed across the community. It could have a really great effect to mitigating flooding and ponding in streets and on other impervious surfaces. So now Katie's going to walk us through a couple more examples of our installations.
Okay, so we'll also be working with an organization to highlight the role of Lo'ikalo, or flooded field taro cultivation, and other Hawaiian stewardship practices that have been employed in community resilience and flood mitigation in this area for centuries. And then lastly, we're going to be having an installation that focuses on connecting the historical and current conditions of flooding to future flood risk, including present-day king tide events, which are a pretty significant issue in the area, and sea level rise projections that will impact the neighborhood. So you can see here we have on the bottom a picture of a king tide event and the Alawai Canal that Melanie talked about earlier, overtopping its banks. And then above that, a picture showcasing kind of creative future adaptation ideas and visions for that place. So we'll have an installation that kind of pairs those two elements. And then lastly, we want to share with you a couple of very early lessons learned. So we've been working on developing relationships with this community through existing social infrastructure. This is a relatively new place to work for both Melanie and I. So trying to build longer term relationships with some of these organizations. This has also meant some additional work and kind of collaborative efforts to connect with organizations that don't necessarily think of themselves as working in risk management or resilience or sea level rise traditionally, and trying to figure out how we can be flexible to ensure that this project can best serve their mission and needs. We also are excited about the opportunity to capture attention through these kind of creative temporary signage and installation and pop-up events as a way of doing active community engagement that is not exclusively in the virtual space during COVID. And then lastly, we're excited about kind of this asset-focused risk management messaging and see this as a potential to be a model that other neighborhoods around Hawaii and potentially beyond could adopt themselves in thinking about connectivity of water to place and the full complexities and nuances of that when it comes to resilience. So with that, I will say thank you. This is our email contact. You're welcome to reach out to us should you have any questions. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.